Hello there, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be going over Evil Dead, released in 1987. And after the first one was such a huge success, it was actually banned in a lot of places, and Sam Raimi was brought up on obscenity charges and almost went to prison for that movie. But thank God that that's not what happened, because we are lucky to be able to create art and express mediums like film and television. So I think that it's awesome that he was able to make a sequel to this. I think it's well known as one of like the better sequels in horror history. A lot of people do not like sequels in movies, and I catch this one being a lot of people's favorite. They like it better than the original sometimes. This movie has a higher budget, but it feels really similar to the first one, and I like how they keep the tone of it. And it takes place right after the first one, if you know how to pick up from the first frame after you skip like the first 8 minutes, and you get the exact continuation from the long extended night of the Evil Dead right into the Evil Dead 2. I actually don't mind the recap. I think it's really cool, but I obviously don't count it as, canon whenever I'm watching the series. With all of that being said, let's get into the Evil Dead 2. So if you thought the entire night of terror that Ash Williams and all of his friends had just went through was over, well, you are wrong, because that cliffhanger ending at the end of the first one picks up right here at the beginning of the second one, and we get Ash hit with that camera, which is the evil spirit in the woods. And I think it's a really crazy thing playing with Ash being a Deadite. I always loved this movie. I can't even imagine it not being there with the first one. I watched them back to back. I remember for the first time when I got them actually from the store. They're so similar, and there's a lot of times whenever I confuse the sequences from the first one and second one. Sometimes I forget which one happens in which is really, really great actually if you think about it, and I appreciate that. But it's also really fun and surprising because every time I watch it, there's the suspense factor, because you never know which one's gonna have which scene, which I think that you would get better at being able to tell us the more times you watch it, but I just don't. I like the idea of picking it up again here because it would make no sense for him to ever go back to this place. So whenever he's running through the woods and coming back to the cabin and dealing with everything, I love how it's kind of like the ending of the first one where he's running around dealing with chaos all by himself. We get one of the best shots, I think, of the entire franchise, and this is one of my favorite things, especially from a filmmaker's perspective, is whenever they're going through the cabin with that one camera angle and the Force thing is chasing him through every shot and through every turn and corner around the cabin, and it eventually loses Ash and reverses out. It reminds me of the opening of the first one, and just like the other tree moments, which thank God they have in this one, and you can tell are updated and look really, really great. And so I really like both of them for both reasons. I like how the first one feels very real and, official, but like homemade kind of, like you get that it was like an older, low budget movie. And the second one looks exactly like the same woods, the same place, and like the feel and everything is perfect, but you can tell that there's like a little bit of a higher quality there. So it's almost like two sides of the same coin, and that's pretty much what these two movies are for each other. There's so many things that are the same that they both do so well, and I really love that. Now, while I think that there are moments that they do better in this one than the first, there's also some moments that they do better in the first than this. Some of the things that don't always work for me are like the holographic projected ghost things. So like when there's that like face on the cabin, that's a little weird. Or whenever like later in the movie her father shows up, that's weird for me. I love the backstory on the Book of the Dead and the things in the cellar, which is going to come to a huge play in this movie again. I like how whenever he's going through the things with Linda, that's one of the most terrifying moments. I love the stop animation technology that they used for this. Obviously it's very dated, but it still looks really amazing, and it can you imagine pulling that off back then? I think it's so cool. It's also really terrifying, and I think it's such a metaphor for psychological breaking, and Ash dealing with that decapitated head of hers and biting him and possessing him and having him take it to the shed and cut it up into pieces, and whenever he gets attacked by the chainsaw in her body at the same time, like that's one of the best parts, and it's such a flash forward to what's going to be happening. And he takes the chainsaw inside with him and doesn't even know what's going to happen with it yet. Bruce Campbell's physical acting in this is amazing, and I know everybody talks about that, but it really is so great. You know, there are so many things that I learned about the production of both of these movies and how hard both of the people who made this and Bruce Campbell had to work on the sets to get this done. They had no money to pay anybody with the first one, and a lot of the actors left and they had to finish everything themselves. And in this one, you can tell that they really were proud of themselves for that and kind of patted each other on the back, because they set the story up where Ash is very much holding this movie for a while, and even when other characters are involved, he still has got the main focus, and I really love that. And it's this scene wherever his hand is possessed and taking over him is some of the best. You know, every time I watch it, I never believe that it's him acting. It feels like the hand is really possessed. I've watched it in slow motion. I've watched it countless times, and never once have I ever felt or been able to catch or make it look like that it doesn't work. You know, it really does. He sells this performance, and having him cut his hand off with a chainsaw is so amazing. I obviously love that there's the blood showing on his face, but I wish they would have showed us a little more like how they did in the first one. But remember how he was brought up on obscenity charges, and the first one was so obscure. They tried to cut back on that a little bit and amp it up in different ways, and they did that with the production of the forest and the cabin itself and the quality of the camera and set and world building with the the stop motion animation and the Evil Deadites and stuff, because one of the tricks they used was turning the liquids black and green, and obviously it makes sense because these people are possessed and maybe demonic goo would be coming out of them. But that is another flaw that kind of puts the other one above this one for me, where I just love the gore and the graphic. It makes me unsettled still to this day, and it's just perfect for that. So this one does that well, but it doesn't do it better. But I still think that it is just as good as the first one, which is absolutely important. It's so good that it literally feels like one long movie. And not many things do that. The only other thing I can think of is Halloween Kills, and not many people would agree with me on that, but fuck off, I don't care. I think it's a great movie. So having the lost pages of the Book of the Dead be incorporated a part of this is really interesting. I think that it's so crucial, and it's such a brilliant way of adding to the story. I love when a sequel can expand upon the world, and this one does that through everything else that I've been talking about, yes, but also with these characters that are the people who own the cabin, and the Book of the Dead and the dagger that come with it, and these lost pages that are inked in blood, bound by flesh. I love the little recap in the beginning and the introduction to what this portal and passageway and time thing is, and having her try to find her way so she can translate them and get them into the book, and stumbling upon Ash being there is such a crazy concept. I like how there's that whole laughing scene that takes place, and that's going down, and whenever I was younger, that actually really scared me. And then whenever I got a little older, I thought it was kind of funny. But rewatching it again, it actually is still really terrifying. I mean, all the demonic laughing and his breaking of his mind, and you can tell that he's laughing out of terror, not because because he knows it's in a horror comedy. It's crazy what's happening, and I think it's perfect how they do all of those physical things. That is such set production genius. These other characters coming in and interfering and throwing Ash down into the cellar because they think that he's a killer is another interesting concept, which really gave me anxiety, and I love that they did that because it's a brilliant way to make your movie have tension. But something else that they did so perfectly was get Ash validated in the eyes of everyone there. You don't want to hold off on that for too long, and I'm glad that they didn't. I kind of like whenever people get almost instant justification or validation. That moment whenever they are so scared and don't know what to do, and he's begging to be let out because that Deadite is in the basement, and you learn that it's buried down there. That's also one of my favorite parts. I think it's the scariest. I love the physical work of the props in this movie, and the Deadites are some of my favorite things. I like how we get the classic face in the cellar again, and how all of these characters are just trying to like figure out what's going on, and they all start dying one by one. You know, the possession of her boyfriend, which is actually one of the scariest deadites to me, with all of the teeth. It's so gross. I hate it. It makes me cringe. Because it's so good, it really, really affects me, and I love how they chop him up, and I like how they chainsaw the other one. And when we start coming to the, concluding finale of this, where he has to go into the shed and make the chainsaw his hand, I think that's one of the best parts of this franchise. Obviously, everybody does, but nobody knew how iconic that would be or how amazing it was. It was such a perfect idea because that's never been done before, and I still don't think it has. There's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and there's been spoofs and parodies and things, but they'll only ever be this one incarnation of this happening. I really think this is the first time that I've ever heard of this. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but a survivor cutting off his own hand with a chainsaw and then using that very chainsaw as a hand. And it comes in very well later into the sequels and TV show. Some other things I liked are the blood spewing out of the walls and coming at him. That was really one of my favorite parts, because in the original, they do that blood flooding in the basement. And that's one of the parts that I think always happens in the first one and doesn't. It happens in this one. So I'm always really excited to see that scene. I think it's really scary whenever they're out there with the trees. That's another one of my favorite parts that gives me the chills. I love how the vibe of this forest looks. It's so dark and demented, but it feels just like where I grew up in Ohio. I feel like I've roamed these woods. I feel like I've been there, and having another tree attack and sacrifice as crazy, and that crazy guy makes them go outside to try to find her, and they're all lost out there when the woods are going crazy and attacking everything and everybody. Evil Ash is popping up all over the place. He is trying to get the main character. He chases her around for a while. There's some great physical action in that. Some more great camera movements. This entire movie, just like the first one, is like inventing and doing like spinning tricks and spin arounds and Dutch angles and ceiling shots and twisting things. It's so crazy. I love it. It's inventive. It's perfect. It's everything that I ever wanted to do out of a horror film. It's probably one of the reasons why I went to film school, and a lot of the reasons why I made the short horror films that ever I did out in the woods in my childhood whenever I was in Ohio. Evil Ash's hand stabbing that girl in the back right whenever she's translating the pages is one of the most heartbreaking parts for me, because I always forget that it happens, and whenever it gets her, I'm like, oh, fuck. And the physical prop of just it being there, in such an interesting way of storytelling, and once you thought that everything was going to be going down, Ash is battling this evil, and I love the way that the face looks, and it breaks into the cabin door, and it's so grotesque and obscure and visually stunning. I'm really in awe and at a loss of words to say with it, because of course I love it, but then there's that other part of me that like kind of wants things to be left up to the imagination. But then I'm also realizing that this is not the embodiment of it. This is just a grotesque version of, coming to physicality with Ash. The way that he's attacking it and trying to get out of the grip and not be sucked into the portal. I love how whenever he does go into the portal, it's like all crazy and time warpy and looks like something out of a music video. And I actually really loved this ending whenever I was younger, but I was so confused because I didn't know there was a third one. I thought it was so crazy that he ended up at the end of the movie where they saw the passages on the lost pages, where there was a person with buildings behind him and a chainsaw and this crowd cheering that says the one that falls from the sky will be the hero. And out of nowhere, he's falling from the sky, and he gets up and the camera starts zooming out, and we see all these medieval people, and I'm like, oh my god, that's crazy. And I thought that that was just kind of like a callback to that page earlier. I had no idea they were setting up something else. And so for many years, I had never even knew that there was an Army of Darkness. So I'll be really excited to get into that. But that's where we end off here. Another cliffhanger ending, another story for Ash Williams. This is the middle chapter of the trilogy, and it's probably one of the better parts. And it's so perfect. I'm so glad that they made this film and that they continued the story and that they keep continuing it, because it makes sense for all of these things to be happening right after each other. Well, that was my review for Evil Dead 2, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy Ash as being, the final guy again. That's one of my best concepts. His character evolution was great, so let me know what your comments are down below. How do you feel about this one versus the first one? And, give me your thoughts on this one just as a standalone as well. Make sure that you tell me all of that great stuff. This is my DVD of The Evil Dead 2, and like I said, I got this for my birthday whenever I got the first one as well, and I'd watched them back to back. It was so perfect, and I really loved being able to understand the story like this. I've, like I said, watched this as many times as I did with the first one, trying to show it around to everybody. Most people never let me show them this one because they didn't like the first one, so this one I feel like is an underrated gem in my life, and so to see that the horror community really loves it is really happy. That makes me so happy, so glad to have it part of my collection. Thank you so much for watching, and I've done a bunch of different genres. I plan to do a bunch more, so be sure to check that out. I've done some location visits and some other fun videos, and check out for whenever I live stream, and check my community tab. I like to do a lot of different polls and post some pictures and ask questions about things, so be sure to check that part of my YouTube page, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.